We are thrilled that you all have joined us. I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining from my office located on Piscataway, Susquehannock land, currently known as Baltimore, Maryland. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to our virtual artist talk given today by Gerald Brown. I'd like to share her bio with you all. Gerald A. Brown is a Chicago South Side native, currently based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She received her BFA from Syracuse University, double emphasis in sculpture and ceramics. She has researched in Paris, as well as furthered her studies at Penland and Haystack Mountain School of Craft. Gerald is an instructor in the Philly and surrounding area, currently teaching at Westchester University and Delaware Art Museum. In addition, she is a social media curator for NCECA, the host of the Unraveling podcast with Gerald A. Brown, and co-founder of the Clay Siblings Project, a nonprofit initiative providing free ceramic workshops around the country. Since January, she has had a solo show titled Careful Less at Baltimore Clayworks. And for more information about our artist talks, please visit our virtual library at baltimoreclayworks.org. I'll now turn it over to Gerald.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for giving my introduction. Was off to a rocky start, but glad to be here. Drove in from Philadelphia earlier today. It's a little rainy, but I'm glad we were able to do a hybrid event. I think after so much COVID stuff, I just really am dying for in-person interaction. So what's up to all the amazing people who are here with me as well as virtually. Yeah, let's get started. I'm super excited to give like a brief presentation about the exhibition and kind of some of the ideas that I'm thinking through. So, there's your guy. All right. So when coming up with the title, I was very, oh wait, hold on. So y'all can see better. When coming up with the title, you know, we do so much in virtual that like, I honestly didn't think about saying this title out loud until I showed up to my own opening. And so I think the way there's no right or wrong way to read it, but the way I read it is careful, careless. It's like kind of this balance between being careful and being careless, but with the intention or the emphasis being on care. So it's my exhibition, second solo exhibition this year. I had one earlier in Philadelphia, and I'm happy to be spreading my roots in Baltimore. Hold on. Okay, cool. So as I mentioned, I'm based in Philadelphia. I'm an artist, curator, instructor, community builder. I wear all the hats. Sometimes that's the only way to pay the bills. But more importantly, I love being able to bring what I learned in one space over to the next. And so as I'm working on my own practice, that's influencing how I'm like working with teaching folks, but then also thinking about how to dismantle systems and build bridges across communities. And so all these kind of interweave together. On the left is a photo of me. I got a chance to do a residency with the Color Network at Watershed, which was amazing. It's this little place in Edge Cobb, Maine, gorgeous scenery, gorgeous food. Got 3 weeks to spend with some like amazing artists of color, leaders and legends in the field. And then on the right is a photo of myself, of course, but also repping Clay Siblings logo, which is the nonprofit project that I run with my best friend, Mike, where we bring free ceramic workshops to high school students across the country. So overall, the premise of my work, is this gonna like block it the whole time? Okay, never mind. The premise of my work is this overarching idea called Descendants of Strange Fruit. It's kind of the best way to kind of bring people into the fold. A lot of my work stems from thinking about how to, come on in. How it stems from how to, properly honor and celebrate Black folks. Originally, a lot of my work started with building, figurative work, a lot of busts, as you can kind of see a little bit in the middle. I really wanted to, I love the way Greek sculpture was and how you kind of create this poise, kind of like posture, but then also had these moments of like balancing triumph and tragedy. And so I thought, what better way to then tell the story of people that I love and that I admire, people that I'm in community with, And so I was very dedicated to wanting to build, of course, atomically correct, busts, but then also like making sure that they looked and embodied the people that I wanted to connect with. But as I got more familiar with techniques, it became very overwhelming how the hand of Eurocentric like values were on the figurative work. Though that's not the only people on earth who have ever worked with figurative, it felt I couldn't move away from that space. And so I wanted to think about how do I create my own language for being able to adequately represent the folks that I'm thinking about. And so as I was kind of building and growing in technical skills with ceramics, I got very infatuated with what's called coil building. And so we're just kind of making these long snakes and you're kind of wrapping it around and building these voluptuous forms. And as I began to get more dynamic with the forms and like changing direction, making sure it goes out, goes in, and kind of moving back and forth, I really started to think about calabash gourds, which are a very historical vessel known across the world, but particularly on the African continent, where they would carve these intricate stories, patterns, details, using for water, food, instruments. And that felt like something that was ancestral to me, and I wanted to pursue that. And so the more that I kind of was chasing this technique or this visual in my mind, the more I started to feel like, maybe I can make my own fruit. And so then that is how I kind of got drawn to maybe thinking about making my own strange fruit. And so it became like this beautiful way of like discovering what feels right with my body, but then also finding a technique that conceptually just kind of mirrors what I wanted. When you're coil building, or for actually when I build busts, I'm making them solid. And so I'm doing all this beautiful aesthetics on the outside, and then I'm cutting it open and hollowing out. And so what is depicted on the outside is not reflective of what it is on the inside. And that felt like a mismatch for like the type of things I was trying to describe with Black folks. And so, but with coil building, because of, the technique and the functionality of needing it to be, hollow, it mirrors what it is on the inside as it does on the outside. And so that's a little bit of a glimpse of like how I got to start making this body of work, but particularly the emphasis and the importance of why I'm working the way I am. And so in addition to making the forms, the environments are very important to me, being able to kind of create these immersive installations for folks to be able to kind of imagine the scenes or the ideals that I'm trying to paint with the fruits. So the objects are important, but then also the environments themselves. And so this is actually a visual from my thesis show at Syracuse University, where on the left side was this Thanksgiving style kind of table that had different categories of what I deem us to consume, like different categories of how we consume Blackness. And so from left to right is like sex workers, Black elites, exceptional Black, working class Blacks, and prisoners. And so thinking about almost these different offerings on the table and thinking critically about how we all participate in this toxicity of the structure, but then offering this moment of cleansing and healing, like this water reservoir, almost to kind of like baptize ourselves or think about healing mechanisms. And so what I really wanted to do was kind of create a moment of oscillating between the two, I guess, inflection points in the installation. So you have this criticality, but then you also have this level of love and consideration. I don't think you can have one really without the other. And so here's a more detailed look at some of the forms I make. As I mentioned, like I'm really thinking about the fluidity, the dynamic energy. Like one of the things that's like most important to me is like, how could I embody almost the energy of perhaps like the crying of Mamie Till, like the strain in her jaws at her son's funeral, but then also the voluptuous like muscles of Serena Williams. Like how can I do both at the same time? And that's what I think the Black experience really is, like all of that and more. And so I'm trying to think about, again, like those older models of when I was thinking about Greek bus, or like thinking about making the bus like that tragedy and that triumph at the same time, like how you can have fears and hopes at like all kind of being created in the same space. I love being able to have these moments where I leave things open. And so you have these kind of like openings where either the skin was broken, or there's just like a way to peek through to the core of the fruit. But also like these little motifs that kind of symbolize like maybe a budding flower, if you will. I'm very in love with terracotta. I think it just makes me feel like I'm at home. I feel like I'm connecting to this lineage of family, but I've been trying to push the surfaces more and more. And so I have a very complicated relationship with color and trying to challenge that as much as I can. So these are some ways that I'm expanding that language when it comes to the surface, because, above all, I don't want it to ever feel like it's a monolith that I'm creating when I'm talking about Blackness. And so like a lot of the conceptual ideas that I'm trying to create in the forms themselves and installations all start from questions or diagrams that I'm wrestling with. They initially were kind of like these private kind of interrogations for myself, or private moments of wrestling with ideas. And so it became really just a process tool. But over time, I really have leaned on trying to make these diagrams more of not only a driving force, like a North Star in my work, but then also trying to, use them as like actual outputs themselves. And so I extrapolate different lines or details from like the diagrams and then turn them into, other kinds of objects. So on the left is like pretty much the first diagram I ever made regarding this kind of work, just interrogating what the strange fruit is, but then pulling on references that are not as deliberate, like poems by Maya Angelou and Langston Hughes, to really kind of get at that idea and create like more of a synthesis. Because really it's not, I'm not creating a contemporary version of like the song. I'm really trying to build on a lineage of this conversation. Like, of course, thinking about Nina Simone and Billie Holiday's interpretations, but then also thinking about all the ways Black people have always written about this experience, whether we coined it as strange fruits. And then on the right, it's like how I'm thinking through, intersectionalities of gender, sexuality, class, being vocal, being silent, and how that perception of the strange fruit is then further complicated the more identities you hold. So these are like other variations of these outputs. So sometimes they look like just physical diagrams, like I'm in love with Venn diagrams, like the idea of having these two uniform circles that embody two ideas in their perfect nature intersecting at this perfect intersection. How not life is that, like in what way do we understand perfection occurring so uniformly? And so while I'm thinking about these ideas or concepts, I'm trying to mimic the lines or the way they intersect and overlap to kind of follow the same nature or complicatedness of that. And it just so happens that ends up looking more like the forms I'm trying to build. Sometimes they look like actual like flip chart diagrams. So like I'm thinking about actual visuals that I love, and then like layering like some kind of clear mylar and being able to annotate and kind of just talk shit about myself or about other things that I'm thinking about. And so taking maybe something on the left that is more like 2D, and how do I layer that on a recognizable thing, such as my body or articles of clothing, etc. And lastly, like sometimes it's just text. Like if you actually look back, this last line on the left, what does our harvest look like, is what this diagram is. And so how can I use legibility / illegibility to kind of push the difficulty of the concepts that I'm trying to bring forward. And so it's not just about the idea of proposing something as abstract as what does our harvest look like is like kind of convoluted, but like the answer you probably could give is probably just as convoluted. And so like, how can I allow that energy to be reflected in all these different outputs that I'm doing? And so, I wanted to just kind of give a brief glimpse at what my practice is like, and then kind of take you a little bit through the exhibition and how some of these things have manifested more recently, especially for folks virtually who aren't able to come to the show. I wanted to give some visuals to kind of better articulate what's going on. And so this exhibition to me is probably one of the most successful iterations of how I'm bringing some of these ideas together. And I'm head over heels excited that I can feel that way about a body of work. I think sometimes we get to the end of the finish line with a product and we're like, most of the time over it. And just like, this has ruminated in my mind so much, like I'm past this moment. But I feel like this show has offered a lot for me to chew on moving forward. First and foremost, like this show is completely covered in diagrams. And so as you look at the walls, like there's just diagrams everywhere. And so it takes this moment from like the first installation I ever did, where it's like this room with this table and the water, and those are the centerpieces, to like almost people not knowing what the centerpiece is. Where is the emphasis? Where do the eyes go? And I like that. Like I want people to just really be curious and wonder and wander. And so, I did this one other time in my show in Philly. The walls were white. But when I was showing here, they told me the walls were black. So immediately I was hyped, because then I would be able to have this opportunity to kind of think through a chalkboard. So like kind of thinking about this as a learning experience for myself, but then also other people, but then also that nothing is precious. The way we understand a chalkboard, we can easily wipe it and erase it and do it over and over. But then also like there's a level of darkness, there's a level of grief in the work, in the diagrams. And I think the black walls really provide us a subtle backdrop to that, which I didn't expect, honestly. I think it crept up on me as I was doing it. I had a lot of these diagrams, previous in my other show, but I changed a lot of them. They come from, the past year with a medical journey that I've been on. I was recently diagnosed with lymphoma cancer, and now I'm in remission. And so the complexities of like going through chemo, going through so many different health operation procedures, things of that nature, but then also like, how do you cope with some of that stuff? I think like the previous show was called Self-Actualization. And so I was trying to maybe think about when everything is stripped away, how do you still show up as yourself? Like, how do you still be who you think you are when the most iconic things about yourself are gone? But this show is about the grief of that, because I think at that point in time, I was just trying to get to this moment of celebration. But this is about talking about the ugly stuff. And so I think that's where Careful and Careless kind of came for me, straddling this line between like being so obsessed with hypervigilance and like constantly being aware of everything going on, and having to manage all of that and exhaustion from that, but then also like desiring to be more careless. So like there's carefree, but I think careless is like this idea of just actually letting go and it not even being an identity, it's just like absolutely like, I guess being pushed to the opposite end of exhaustion, just like actually letting go. And sometimes the perception of being naive, like being immature or not being considerate. And so how do you straddle between those spaces? And so, what I really love about this show, in addition to some of these kind of things showing up in the diagrams, it shows up actually in the work itself. I think this was the first time I kind of made more, this was the first time I kind of really made more not pretty strange fruits. Like I think fruits that were more kind of, I wouldn't say decrepit, but more like decomposing and like having a heavier weight to themselves, both physically and like in the nature of the posture of the dynamic energy that I'm trying to create. This also was one of the first times I got to bring the diagrams and the fruits closer together. I actually ended up kind of I had this vitrine where I stored, I have like the fruits there. I brought back the element of dirt, but then also like found objects from my childhood, from like other parts of my life. And I was able to annotate on top of it. I think that was the first time I was able to kind of make that connection pretty clear. that I'm really, really proud of. It also kind of creates this element of almost like an ant farm. And so we're like peeking in on this experience of the strange fruit and a little bit passing judgment. And I like that. I like that there's like this kind of internal critique that's happening, almost like some voyeurism kind of situation. I also really enjoy this idea of it being a time capsule. So there's these things I've buried for so long that are slowly getting unearthed or being seen, that I cannot hide. And that's very, very scary. I think also, last but not least, that I think I really enjoy about this arrangement is that it's the first time I kind of gotten closer to depicting the crabs in the barrel mentality a little bit. Without making it too on the notes, I think that there's like this internal friction that I'm trying to get at when it comes to like Black folks creating community and desiring love for one another, but then the struggle between that, like how do our identities merge together harmonious without it muddling like each other? And so I'm really, really excited about some of these like different notes that I get to pick up on. And for folks who are here, we'll take a tour downstairs and then we'll be able to talk more in depthly about this. Here's some shots of, some of the diagrams. I think that, for me, I like to be on the nose, like something that I do in my sketchbook. I kind of just like display it as it is on the wall, but I took the liberty of being more improvisational and spontaneous and collaborative with myself, which I love. A lot of the red kind of symbolizes some of that collaboration, or like, this is a thought that I had, and now this is a new thought that I have on the situation. Yeah, these are like some more details. There's like a lot of ways in which I'm trying to merge materials, merge mixed media. I'm hoping, this summer to like maybe step a little bit away from clay and do more fiber stuff, some more wood, just being able to enhance the complexities of the topics I'm talking about. I think clay occupies this fluid space of being rigid and soft at the same time. Wood is kind of like more on the rigid end, and like textiles is more on the softer end. And so how can I like expand that narrative or that metaphor for Black folks and like how I think about myself, but then also the people I'm in community with. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.